The first thing I remember is the sound of the tray crashing to the floor. The clang of metal against linoleum echoed through the hallway, sharp and startling, scattering gauze packets and an empty saline flush across the tiles. I bent to pick them up, my pulse jumping, and that was when his hand clamped down on my shoulder. Dr. Harker's grip was iron, his fingers digging hard enough through my scrub top to leave bruises. His voice was low, but it carried a venom that froze me in place. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" It was one mistake. One small mistake. I had charted the antibiotic a few minutes late, distracted by another patient's call light. And when he saw the timestamp, his fury erupted like a storm breaking open. I opened my mouth to explain, to tell him it had already been administered, and that no harm had come to the patient. But before I could finish, his hand shoved me backward against the supply room wall. My head rattled against the plaster with a dull thud. The air rushed out of my lungs, fear rooting me to the spot. For a split second, I wondered if anyone in the hall had heard, if anyone would step in. But the corridor outside buzzed on, oblivious, monitors beeping and voices blending into the usual hospital noise. He leaned close, his eyes sharp and unyielding. "Sloppy work like yours kills people. If you can't handle basic responsibilities, you don't belong here." His words cut deeper than his grip, but it was the violence, the sheer shock of it, that burned into my mind. Nurses endured harsh tones, cutting remarks, impossible standards. But physical force? That crossed a line so sharp it left me reeling. When he finally released me, I stumbled forward, clutching the counter for balance. My shoulder throbbed where his hand had been, the skin already tender beneath the fabric. He stepped back, straightened his coat, and hissed one final warning. "Fix your mess before you kill someone." Then he strode out, leaving me gasping in the supply room, staring at the scattered items on the floor as though they were evidence of my failure. I don't know how long I stood there, my heart pounding against my ribs. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter until the tremors settled. Every instinct screamed at me to tell someone, to march straight to charge Nurse Janet's office, to make sure his behavior was documented. But another voice, quieter but insidious, whispered, "No one will believe you. He's Dr. Harker. You're just a nurse." Still, I couldn't stay frozen in that room. I gathered the supplies with unsteady hands and forced myself back onto the floor, my smile brittle, my steps shaky. The hospital machine ground on, patients needing meds, vitals needing checks, families needing explanations. There was no pause button for trauma. Carla caught sight of me near the med cart. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a shrug. "Just tired." But the truth pressed against my chest, a secret too heavy to carry. Later, when the adrenaline wore off, the shaking returned. I sat in the staff restroom, door locked, my shoulder throbbing where his fingers had left their mark. I rolled up my sleeve just far enough to see the angry red imprint on my skin. Proof. Proof of what had happened. But proof meant nothing if no one wanted to believe it. I thought back to the weeks leading up to this moment, the mounting tension, the way his eyes lingered on me like he was waiting for me to fail. The criticisms that cut sharper with each passing day. The mistakes I had made, small but magnified under his gaze. And now, this. It hadn't started here, with his hand against my shoulder. It had started earlier, in the subtle ways power tilts the ground beneath your feet until you no longer stand on solid earth. I pressed the sleeve back down and leaned against the cool tile wall, my mind replaying the incident over and over, searching for the moment it could have gone differently. But no matter how I turned it, it always ended with his hand on me, his fury spilling into violence. The rest of the day blurred into something dreamlike. I moved from room to room, my smile painted on, my voice steady even as my chest felt like it was caving in. The patients couldn't know. They needed stability, not a nurse unraveling in front of them. But behind that mask, the question gnawed at me. What happens now? Because this wasn't just about me anymore. If he could do this once, what stopped him from doing it again? What stopped him from going further? As the sun dipped low outside the hospital windows, casting long shadows down the hallways, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I walked straight out of the restroom and didn't bother returning to the floor. My shoulder still ached where his grip had left its mark, and I could feel the heat of it radiating under my sleeve. I didn't pause, didn't second guess. I went directly to Janet's office, knocked once, and stepped inside. She looked up from her desk, startled at the abruptness. "Everything all right?" "No," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. Dr. Harker just put his hands on me in the supply room. He shoved me against the wall. Her eyes widened, the pen in her hand dropping onto the desk. For a beat, the room was silent except for the hum of the air vent. Then she rose from her chair. "Sit down," she said firmly. "Start from the beginning." I sat, every nerve still buzzing, and repeated it clearly. The grip on my shoulder, the shove, the words he hissed. I rolled up my sleeve just enough to show her the red marks pressed into my skin. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask me if I was sure. She picked up the phone and called security. Within minutes, 2 uniformed officers appeared in the office. Janet gave them a quick summary, and one of them asked me for details again. I repeated everything, my voice steadier this time. They photographed my shoulder, jotted notes, and then one of them left to locate Harker. Janet placed a hand on the desk between us. "You did the right thing coming straight here. You're safe now, safe." The word didn't fit yet, not while he was still somewhere in the building. They found him in the hallway outside the OR, already suited up for a consult. His voice carried down the corridor, sharp and commanding, but it broke off when security approached. Staff stopped what they were doing, eyes flicking between the officers and the surgeon as tension thickened the air. "Dr. Harker," one officer said calmly, "we need you to come with us." "What is this?" His voice boomed. "I'm in the middle of patient care." "It won't take long," the officer replied. "We just need to speak with you." Whispers rippled through the nearby nurses and techs. He glanced around, his eyes narrowing when they landed on me standing at the end of the hall with Janet. His face darkened, lips tightening in fury. "You!" he spat, his voice low but carrying. "This is ridiculous." The officers stepped in, their bodies forming a wall between him and the rest of us. "Let's go," one said firmly. He resisted for a moment, muttering curses under his breath, but eventually allowed them to escort him away. The hallway buzzed with murmurs as the doors swung shut behind them. Carla came up beside me, her eyes wide. "What just happened?" I didn't flinch this time. "He grabbed me." I reported it. She blinked, then nodded slowly, her expression shifting from shock to understanding. "Good. About damn time someone did." The rest of the shift moved strangely, like walking through a dream where everything looked familiar but carried an edge of unreality. Words spread fast. People whispered in corners, exchanged quick glances, avoided asking too many questions outright. But I could feel it. Eyes on me, curiosity, support from some, judgment from others. I stayed focused on my patients. Their needs hadn't changed. Medications still had to be delivered, vitals charted, dressings changed. But every time I stepped into the hall, I caught the ripple effect of what had happened. By late afternoon, administration called me in. The office smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, blinds pulled halfway against the slant of sun. 2 administrators sat across the desk, their faces neutral but alert. Janet sat beside me, a quiet presence of support. They asked me to recount everything in detail, and I did. Every word, every motion, every bruise. They listened closely, jotting notes, asking clarifying questions. No one doubted me. No one tried to soften it. "This is a serious matter," one of them said. "We'll be initiating a formal investigation. Security has already detained Dr. Harker for questioning. Until further notice, he's suspended from all clinical duties." The words hit like a heavy door closing. Suspended, just like that. "He'll be removed from the premises tonight," the other added. "You won't have to encounter him again here." Relief loosened the knot in my chest, though it didn't erase the ache in my shoulder or the memory of his fury. "Do you want to press charges?" the first administrator asked carefully. I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Janet's hand squeezed mine under the table, silent reassurance. When I left the office, the sun had dipped lower, casting golden light through the tall windows. The hallways were quieter now, staff subdued, the earlier gossip settling into an uneasy calm. I returned to the unit long enough to finish my shift. My patients still needed me, and I wasn't going to let his violence rob me of the part of this job that mattered most. Mr. Lawson thanked me for catching a med interaction. Mrs. Kent smiled faintly when I adjusted her pillows, and the young woman with abdominal pain squeezed my hand as she drifted off for a scan. Those moments grounded me, steadying me against the chaos that swirled just beyond the room doors. When 7 o'clock rolled around and the night shift took over, I signed out and left the floor without looking back. Security escorted me to my car. It wasn't protocol, but Janet had insisted. The lot was dim, the air cool, and I felt the tension ease only once I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. On the way home, the weight of the day pressed down. It wasn't fear now. It was exhaustion, the kind that went bone deep. My body ached, my mind spun, but there was also clarity. I hadn't faltered, hadn't stayed silent. I had acted, and the system had acted with me. At home, I dropped my bag by the door and sank onto the couch. My shoulder throbbed, but the sight of my quiet living room steadied me. Here, at least, the air was calm. I thought about tomorrow, about the inevitable questions, the investigation, the paperwork. But I also thought about my patients, about why I walked into that hospital every day despite the chaos and pressure. And I thought about what it meant to stand up, not just for myself, but for the safety of everyone who walked through those doors. Dr. Harker was gone now, arrested, suspended, stripped of the power he had abused. The hospital would move forward, and so would I.